2:37 a.m. The red numbers on the microwave glowed like angry eyes in my dark kitchen. I couldn't sleep again. Haven't been able to for weeks now, not since Julia started her late work nights and wine club meetings that somehow never involved actual wine on her breath when she stumbled home. I'm Calvin Barnes, 52 years old, and I restore furniture for a living. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps my hands busy. More importantly, it's taught me to notice when something's been moved, touched, or doesn't belong, like the men's jacket hanging in our mudroom that definitely wasn't mine. The jacket was expensive. Wool blend, charcoal gray, size medium. I'm a large. My son Tyler is extra large and lives 3 states away in Seattle, working for some tech company that pays him more in a month than I make in 6. The jacket smelled like cologne I didn't recognize and had a receipt in the pocket from Romano's, the fancy Italian place downtown. Dated last Tuesday. Julia told me she was at book club last Tuesday. I set the jacket on the kitchen counter and made coffee. Strong coffee. The kind that could wake the dead or at least help a man think clearly at 3 in the morning. Outside, October wind rattled the windows of our colonial house in Brookfield, Massachusetts. We'd lived here for 23 years, raised Tyler here, built what I thought was a good life. The front door opened with that particular squeak I'd been meaning to fix for months. Heels clicked across the hardwood foyer, trying to be quiet and failing miserably. "Cal, you awake, honey?" Julia's voice carried that forced cheerfulness she used when she'd been caught doing something. I knew that tone well after 25 years of marriage. "In the kitchen," I called back, taking a sip of coffee and watching the doorway. She appeared looking perfectly put together despite the late hour. Hair still styled, makeup intact, wearing the black dress she'd left in that morning for her client dinner. At 48, Julia was still beautiful in that polished, professional way that made other men look twice. Apparently, one of them had been looking a lot more than twice. "Working late again?" I asked, gesturing to the jacket with my coffee mug. Her eyes flicked to the jacket, and I saw the micro-expression of panic before she recovered. "Oh, that's Tyler's. He left it here last time he visited." "Funny thing about that," I said, pulling out my phone. "I just texted Tyler to ask about it." The color drained from her face. "Cal, you didn't need to bother him at this hour." My phone buzzed. I read the message aloud. "Haven't been home in weeks, Dad. Also, you should think about getting a nursing home bed. You're getting old and paranoid." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Julia's mouth opened and closed without sound. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the tile floor. "That's when I knew it was on," I said quietly. "Cal, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You've always been good with words. Marketing executive, right? Spin is your specialty." I picked up the jacket and held it out to her. "But this isn't Tyler's jacket, and we both know it." She snatched the jacket from my hands, her professional mask slipping. "You're being ridiculous. I don't know why you're acting like this. Because my wife comes home at 2:30 in the morning wearing another man's cologne, and my son thinks I belong in a nursing home." I finished my coffee and set the mug in the sink. Makes a man wonder what other surprises are waiting for him. Julia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it instinctively, and I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen. Brett. Her face went white. "Expecting someone?" I asked. She shoved the phone into her purse. "It's work. Always work with you, isn't it, Cal? Maybe if you paid attention to something other than your dusty old furniture. Maybe if my wife came home before midnight once in a while, I wouldn't have to pay attention to strange jackets and late-night text messages." She turned on her heel and headed for the stairs. "I'm going to bed. We'll talk about this tomorrow when you're being rational." "Julia." She stopped at the bottom of the staircase. "Tomorrow, I'm going to find out who Brett is." Her shoulders tensed, but she didn't turn around. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." She climbed the stairs, and I heard our bedroom door close with more force than necessary. I sat back down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. Julia had left it on the counter, probably in her hurry to explain away the jacket. She was always forgetting to log out of her email. 20 minutes later, I was reading a string of messages that made my coffee taste like acid. Hotel reservations, Dinner plans. Messages that started with "missing you already" and ended with promises that made 25 years of marriage feel like a joke. Brett Renard, creative director at some advertising agency downtown. 38 years old, according to his company bio. Divorced. Drove a vintage Mustang and apparently had a thing for married women who told their husbands they were working late. I closed the laptop and stared out the kitchen window at our quiet suburban street. Mr. Lyle's house across the way was dark except for the porch light he never turned off. The Hendersons' dog was barking at something in their backyard. Normal sounds from a normal neighborhood where normal people lived normal lives. But nothing about my life felt normal anymore. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Jace Murphy's number. Jace and I had been friends since high school, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped him move his workshop equipment last spring. More importantly, Jace had a talent for creative problem solving and a complete lack of respect for authority. The phone rang 4 times before his gravelly voice answered. "Cal? Christ, it's almost 4 in the morning. Someone better be dead." "Not yet," I said, "but I need your help with something." "What kind of something?" I looked at the jacket Julia had left on the counter in her hasty retreat upstairs. The kind that requires a pickup truck and a complete disregard for other people's feelings. Jace was quiet for a moment. Then he chuckled. "Julia finally step in it?" "Up to her neck." "I'll be over in an hour. Put on some more coffee." I hung up and smiled for the first time in weeks. Tyler thought I needed a nursing home bed. Julia thought I was old and paranoid. Brett Renard thought he was clever, stealing another man's wife. They were all about to learn that Calvin Barnes wasn't nearly as old or harmless as they thought. Jace arrived at 5 a.m. sharp, looking like he'd slept in his clothes and hadn't bothered to comb his hair. At 55, he was 3 years older than me, but moved like a man half his age. 20 years of construction work had left him lean and tough, with calloused hands and a permanent squint from working in the sun. "So what's the plan, Chief?" he asked, accepting a mug of coffee and settling into the chair across from me. I slid Julia's laptop across the table. "First, we gather intelligence. I need to know everything about Brett Renard. Where he lives, where he works, what he drives, where he takes my wife for their romantic dinners." Jace scrolled through the email chain, whistling low under his breath. "Damn, Cal. She really went all in, didn't she? Look at this one from last week. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again." "That's your wife writing that?" 25 years of marriage," I said. 25 years, and she throws it away for some divorced pretty boy with a sports car. "What do you want to do about it?" I leaned back in my chair, considering. "Nothing illegal. Nothing that'll get us arrested or sued. But I want him to understand that actions have consequences. I want them both to understand." Physical consequences? Embarrassing consequences. Public consequences. The kind that make a man think twice before he puts his hands on another man's wife. Jace grinned. "Now you're talking my language." "What did you have in mind?" I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Brett drives a 1967 Mustang Fastback, cherry red, according to his Instagram account. Parks it in the lot behind Romano's every Tuesday and Thursday for his dates with Julia. Nice car. Be a shame if something happened to it. Nothing permanent, just inconvenient. I turned to a fresh page. He lives in those new condos on Maple Street, the ones with the underground garage and the security cameras. Security cameras are a problem? Not if we're creative about it. I showed him a photo from Brett's social media. He posts pictures of everything. His car, his apartment, his workout routine at the gym on 5th Street, even his grocery shopping. The man documents his entire life online. Narcissist. Exactly. And narcissists hate being embarrassed more than anything else. We spent the next hour planning. Jace knew a guy who could get us a GPS tracker, the kind private investigators used. Nothing illegal about tracking a car in a public parking lot, especially if you were just trying to document your wife's affair for divorce proceedings. "What about Julia?" Jace asked as we finished our 3rd pot of coffee. "What about her? You going to file for divorce?" I stared out the window at the sunrise painting our neighborhood in soft orange light. I don't know yet. First, I want her to understand what she's done. Really understand. She thinks I'm some old fool who'll just roll over and take it. She thinks I'll quietly disappear into a nursing home while she plays house with her boyfriend. And Tyler? Your own son telling you to get a nursing home bed? That stung more than Julia's affair, if I was being honest. Tyler's been distant since he moved to Seattle. Gets his mother's side of every story. Probably thinks I'm some controlling husband who doesn't appreciate his successful wife. Kids don't know shit about marriage until they've been married themselves. Tyler's 32 and never been engaged. Too busy making money to make time for relationships. Ironic, considering he's giving me advice about mine. Jay stood up and stretched. So, where do we start? Romano's. Tonight's Thursday. According to Julia's calendar, she has a client dinner at 7. I want to see them together. Get some pictures. Confirm what we already know. And then? Then we start making Brett Renard's life interesting. At 8 that morning, Julia came downstairs dressed for work like nothing had happened. Charcoal gray suit, hair perfect, makeup flawless. She poured coffee into her travel mug without looking at me. "Morning," she said coolly. "Sleep well?" "Fine." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'll be late tonight. Client dinner." "With Brett?" She froze with her hand on the doorknob. "With the Morrison account team. It's a big presentation." "At Romano's?" Now she turned around, and I saw fear flicker across her face. What are you talking about?" I held up her credit card statement, which I'd printed from her laptop that morning. Funny how many Morrison account dinners happen at Romano's. Twice a week for the past 3 months. Must be a very complicated account. "Cal, you went through my personal..." "Your personal what? Your personal credit card that's linked to our joint account? Your personal laptop that you left open on my kitchen counter?" I stood up slowly. "Or maybe you mean your personal affair with Brett Renard?" The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you think you know. I know you've been lying to me for months. I know you've been meeting another man while telling me you're working late. I know our son thinks I'm too old and stupid to figure it out." I walked toward her, and she backed against the door. "What I don't know is why." "Cal, please." 25 years, Julia. 25 years of marriage, and this is how you want to end it? Sneaking around like a teenager? Making me look like a fool in front of our friends and family? Tears started in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "It's exactly what I think. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" She wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara. "What do you want?" "I want the truth. All of it. How long it's been going on, how serious it is, whether you want to save our marriage or end it. And if I tell you, then we'll figure out what comes next. Together, like married people are supposed to do." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months. The woman I'd fallen in love with 27 years ago. Vulnerable. Real. Human. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You've had 3 months to think. While you were thinking, I was sitting here wondering what I'd done wrong, why my wife didn't want to come home anymore, why my son thought I was losing my mind. Tyler doesn't think..." "Tyler told me to get a nursing home bed, Julia. Our son thinks I'm too old and paranoid to notice my wife is having an affair. What does that tell you about the story you've been telling him?" She opened the door without another word and left for work. I watched through the window as she sat in her car for 5 minutes before driving away, probably calling Brett to tell him I knew. Let her call. Let them both worry about what I might do next. They had no idea what Calvin Barnes was capable of when he put his mind to it. Romano's restaurant sat on the corner of Main and 3rd, all exposed brick and dim lighting, the kind of place where married people took other people's spouses. I sat in Jace's pickup truck across the street at 6:45, camera ready, watching the entrance. "There," Jace said, pointing to a cherry-red Mustang pulling into the lot behind the restaurant. "That's got to be him." Brett Renard stepped out of the car like he was posing for a magazine cover. Tall, lean, wearing a leather jacket that probably cost more than I made in a month. He had that casual confidence of a man who'd never had to work with his hands, never had to worry about making payroll or fixing a leaky roof. Pretty boy, Jace muttered. I can see the appeal. Can you? For women who like that type. All style, no substance. The kind of guy who spends more on hair products than most people spend on groceries. Brett checked his phone, smoothed his hair, and walked toward the restaurant entrance. He moved like he owned the world, like taking another man's wife was just another Tuesday night for him. There's Julia, I said, watching my wife's BMW pull into the lot. She got out wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Black, form-fitting, the kind of thing she used to wear when we were dating, when she wanted to impress me. Now she was wearing it for him. They met at the restaurant entrance, and Brett leaned down to kiss her cheek. Nothing too obvious, nothing that would scandalize the other diners, but intimate enough that anyone watching would know they weren't discussing business. You getting this? Jace asked. I snapped photos through the telephoto lens, Julia laughing at something Brett said. Brett's hand on the small of her back as he opened the door for her, the two of them disappearing inside together. Got it. What now? Now we wait, see how long they stay, where they go after dinner. We didn't have to wait long. An hour and a half later, they emerged from Romano's walking close together, Brett's arm around Julia's shoulders. They stopped beside his Mustang, and he pressed her against the driver's side door for a kiss that definitely wasn't about business. Jesus, Jace said, right out in public. She's not even trying to hide it anymore. I kept taking pictures, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. 25 years of marriage, and she was making out with another man in a restaurant parking lot like some college kid. They talked for a few more minutes before Julia walked to her own car. Brett waited until she drove away before getting into the Mustang. I memorized his license plate number as he pulled out of the lot. Follow him? Jace asked. Not tonight. Tonight, we plant the tracker. The GPS device was smaller than I'd expected, about the size of a matchbox with a magnetic backing. Jace had gotten it from his cousin who ran a repo business, completely legal as long as we weren't planning to steal the car. We waited until the restaurant closed and the lot was empty except for a few employee vehicles. The Mustang sat under a streetlight like a red jewel, all chrome and curves and American muscle. Nice ride, Jace admitted as we approached the car. Shame about the owner. I knelt beside the rear bumper and attached the tracker to the underside of the frame. It clicked into place with a soft magnetic thunk. Done. That's it? That's it. Now we'll know everywhere he goes, every time he meets my wife, every pattern in his routine. And then, I stood up and brushed the dirt off my knees. Then we start making his life complicated. The next morning, I tracked Brett's movements on my laptop. The GPS showed him leaving his condo at 7:30, stopping at a Starbucks on Elm Street, arriving at his office at 8:15. Predictable. Routine. Julia came downstairs at 8, moving carefully around me like I was a dangerous animal. How was your client dinner? I asked without looking up from the laptop. Fine. Morrison account going well? She poured coffee with shaking hands. Yes? Funny thing, I called Morrison Industries yesterday, asked to speak to their marketing director about the account they have with Julia's company. She went very still. They don't have an account with your company, Julia. Never have. The marketing director was very confused about why I was asking. The coffee mug slipped from her hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. She stared at the mess like she couldn't figure out how it had happened. Cal, 25 years, I said quietly. 25 years, and you can't even lie to me convincingly anymore. She knelt to pick up the pieces of the mug, and I saw tears dripping onto the ceramic shards. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen. For 3 months, it's been happening. Every Tuesday and Thursday, it's been happening. She looked up at me with mascara-streaked cheeks. How did you know about Tuesdays and Thursdays? I turned the laptop around so she could see Brett's location history. Technology, Julia. The same technology you've been using to coordinate your affair. Text messages, email, credit card records, GPS tracking. It's all there. You've been tracking him? I've been trying to understand what my wife has been doing with her time. Turns out she's been spending it with Brett Renard, creative director, divorced, drives a red Mustang, lives on Maple Street in Condo 4B. She sat back on her heels, surrounded by broken ceramic. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I can tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going quietly into a nursing home while you and your boyfriend divide up 25 years of my life. Tyler meant exactly what he said. He thinks I'm old and paranoid and in the way, just like you do. I closed the laptop and stood up. Clean up the mess, Julia. All of it, starting with this affair. And if I don't? I looked down at her kneeling on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the pieces of our broken life. Then I'll clean it up myself, and you won't like my methods. That afternoon, I drove to Brett's office building downtown. Modern glass and steel, the kind of place where creative types wore expensive jeans and called meetings brainstorming sessions. I parked across the street and waited. At 5:30, Brett emerged with a group of colleagues, all young and stylish and laughing at something on someone's phone. He said goodbye to them and walked toward the parking garage where his Mustang was waiting. I followed him at a distance as he drove to the gym on 5th Street. The same gym he posted about on social media, where he took selfies of his workout routine and tagged them with motivational quotes about success and determination. The gym had a parking lot in back with no security cameras. Brett's Mustang sat in the far corner, away from the other cars. He'd be inside for at least an hour based on his social media posts. I pulled my pickup truck alongside the Mustang and got out to examine the situation. No witnesses, no cameras, just me and the car that had been taking my wife to romantic dinners. I didn't key the paint or slash the tires, nothing that would constitute vandalism or property damage. Instead, I opened my toolbox and removed a small valve stem tool. I loosened the valve stems on all 4 tires just enough to let the air out slowly. By the time Brett finished his workout, the Mustang would be sitting on 4 flat tires. I also left a note under his windshield wiper. Hope this isn't as hard to fix as a marriage. A concerned citizen. Then I drove home and waited for the phone call. It came at 8:30. Julia's phone rang while she was pretending to read a book in the living room. Hello? She answered, but I could hear the panic in her voice. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear Brett's agitated tone through the phone. Julia kept saying, I don't know, and are you sure? And maybe it was just a coincidence. She hung up and looked at me. I was sitting in my recliner, reading a woodworking magazine like nothing had happened. Brett's car had some trouble tonight, she said carefully. Oh? What kind of trouble? Flat tires. All 4 of them. That's unfortunate. Probably a manufacturing defect. Those old cars can be unreliable. Someone left a note. I looked up from my magazine. What kind of note? Something about marriage. Sounds like someone's trying to send a message. Cal, did I what? Flatten some stranger's tires? Julia, I've been sitting here reading about dovetail joints for the past 2 hours. You can check the browser history on my laptop if you want. Which was true. I'd made sure to visit several woodworking websites after I got home, establishing a digital alibi. She stared at me for a long moment, trying to read my face, but I'd had 25 years to practice keeping my expressions neutral around my wife. This has to stop, she said finally. What has to stop? Whatever you're doing. He's scared. Maybe he should be. Cal, maybe he should think twice before he puts his hands on another man's wife. Maybe he should consider the consequences of breaking up a 25-year marriage for his own entertainment. It's not entertainment. It's what, Julia? Love? You're in love with him? She didn't answer, but the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. Well, I said, turning back to my magazine. In that case, he better get used to flat tires, because this is just the beginning. The next week, I settled into a routine of surveillance and sabotage. The GPS tracker showed me Brett's patterns. Gym on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, drinks with colleagues on Tuesday, dinner dates with my wife on Thursday, grocery shopping on Saturday morning at the Whole Foods on Park Street. I started small. A bag of flour in his gym locker that would coat his clothes when he opened it. Sugar in his gas tank. Not enough to damage the engine, just enough to make it run rough. A classified ad in the local paper advertising his condo for rent at below market rates, complete with his phone number. By Friday, Brett was getting 20 calls a day from prospective renters. Julia was jumpy and distracted, constantly checking her phone for his updates on the harassment campaign someone was waging against him. Maybe you should tell your friend to be more careful about where he parks, I suggested over dinner. Sounds like someone has it in for him. This isn't funny, Cal. I'm not laughing. You're enjoying this. I set down my fork and looked at her across our dining room table. The same table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together, celebrated, birthdays and anniversaries, made plans for our future. Am I enjoying watching my marriage fall apart? Am I enjoying discovering that my wife has been lying to me for months? Am I enjoying the fact that my own son thinks I belong in a nursing home? I shook my head. No, Julia, I'm not enjoying any of this. Then why? Because if I can't have my wife's respect, at least I can have her attention. For 3 months, you've been treating me like I was invisible, like I was just some old man taking up space in your life. Now you're paying attention. By terrorizing Brett? By showing Brett that actions have consequences, something his parents apparently forgot to teach him. She pushed her plate away, barely touched. He wants to call the police. And tell them what? That someone put flour in his gym locker? That he's getting phone calls about a rental ad? That his tires went flat in a public parking lot? I shrugged. He's welcome to try. Cal, please. Just stop. Whatever you're doing, just stop. Are you going to stop seeing him? She was quiet for a long moment. I can't. Can't or won't. I love him. The words hit me like a physical blow. 25 years of marriage, and my wife was telling me she loved another man. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. I see. Cal, no, I understand. You love him. You've been sneaking around with him for months. You've been lying to me, making me feel crazy, making me doubt myself. But you love him. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I stood up from the table. You love him and you don't love me. Everything else is just details. I walked toward the kitchen, then stopped and turned back. Just so we're clear, Julia. If you love him and you want to be with him, then you need to make a choice, him or me, this marriage or that affair, but you don't get both. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done being the fool. I'm done pretending this isn't happening. I'm done sitting quietly while you decide whether I'm worth keeping around. I looked at her sitting at our dining room table, beautiful and guilty and scared. Choose. I need time. You've had time. 3 months of time. Time to sneak around, time to lie, time to make me look like an idiot while you played house with your boyfriend. I shook my head. No more time, Julia. Choose. That weekend, Brett made a mistake. The GPS tracker showed him leaving his condo Saturday morning and driving not to Whole Foods, but to our neighborhood. He parked 3 blocks away and walked to our house while I was supposedly at the hardware store. But I wasn't at the hardware store. I was sitting in Jace's truck at the end of our street, watching Brett Renard walk up to my front door like he owned the place. Julia let him in immediately, like she'd been expecting him. Through our living room window, I could see them talking animatedly. Brett gesturing with his hands, Julia shaking her head. They were arguing about something. Bold move, Jace said from the driver's seat, coming to your house in broad daylight. Stupid move, I corrected. He's getting careless. Desperate. What do you want to do about it? I thought about it. Brett was in my house with my wife, probably trying to convince her to leave me, making himself comfortable in the home I'd worked 23 years to pay for. Nothing yet. Let him get comfortable. Let him think he's safe. We watched for an hour before Brett emerged from the house. He looked around nervously before walking back to his car, like he was worried about being seen. Too little. Too late for that kind of caution. Now? Jace asked. Now. We followed Brett back to his condo, keeping a safe distance. He parked in the underground garage and took the elevator to the 4th floor. According to the building directory, Unit 4B was at the end of the hall, next to the emergency exit. Security cameras in the garage, Jace noted as we drove past the building. But not in the emergency stairwell, I said, and not on the 4th floor hallway. That night we returned with supplies. Jace had brought a small toolkit and a bag of what he called party favors. Stink bombs, itching powder, and a container of live crickets he'd bought from a pet store. "This feels like high school," he said as we climbed the emergency stairs to the 4th floor. "High school bullies didn't steal other people's wives." Fair point. The hallway was empty and dimly lit. Unit 4B had a fancy electronic lock, but the door itself was standard apartment grade. Jace had it open in under 2 minutes. "Remind me never to piss you off," I said. 20 years of construction work. You learn things. Brett's apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Modern furniture, expensive electronics, abstract art on the walls. The kind of place designed to impress dates, not to build a life in. We worked quickly. Itching powder in his laundry detergent. Stink bombs taped under his couch cushions with timer mechanisms set for the next morning. Crickets released in his bedroom closet. I also left a more personal touch. A framed photo of Julia and me from our wedding day, placed prominently on his coffee table where he couldn't miss it. "You think this will work?" Jace asked as we prepared to leave. "It'll work. The question is how he'll react." We didn't have to wait long to find out. Sunday afternoon, Julia's phone started ringing every 10 minutes. She answered in another room, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "Problems with your friend?" I asked when she came back to the living room. "Someone broke into his apartment." "That's terrible." "Did they steal anything?" "No, they just made a mess. Left some kind of prank items, and they left a photo." "What kind of photo?" She looked at me with something between fear and admiration. "Our wedding photo." Sounds personal." "Cal, this has to stop. You're scaring him." "Good. He's talking about moving, leaving town." "Even better." "What about me?" I looked up from the newspaper I was pretending to read. "What about you?" "If he leaves, what happens to me?" "That depends. Are you going with him?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know." "Then I guess you better figure it out, because one way or another this situation is going to resolve itself soon." "What do you mean?" I folded the newspaper and set it aside. "I mean, Brett Renard is discovering that stealing another man's wife comes with complications he didn't expect. And you're discovering that having an affair isn't as simple as you thought it would be. And if I choose him, then you choose him. But you don't get to keep me as a backup plan while you decide. You don't get to live in my house and spend my money while you're sneaking around with your boyfriend. This is my house too." "Is it?" "Because you haven't been acting like it. You've been acting like a guest who's overstayed her welcome." That evening, Brett called Julia in a panic. I could hear his voice through the phone from across the room, high-pitched and agitated. Something about his car, something about the police, something about harassment. Julia hung up and turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Someone called the police and reported Brett's car as stolen. They impounded it from the gym parking lot. He had to spend 4 hours at the police station proving it was his." "Bureaucratic mix-up, probably. Those things happen. Cal, please, I'm begging you, stop this." "Stop what?" "Whatever you're doing to him. This campaign of harassment, these pranks. It's getting out of hand." I stood up and walked over to where she was sitting on the couch. She looked small and frightened, nothing like the confident marketing executive who'd been lying to me for months. "Julia, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not harassing Brett Renard. I am not breaking into his apartment or calling in false police reports or putting sugar in his gas tank. Do you understand? But I am sitting in my house, reading my newspaper, working on my furniture projects, and watching my wife choose between her marriage and her affair. That's all I'm doing. Then who? Maybe Brett has other enemies. Maybe he's made this mistake before. Maybe the universe is trying to tell him something about sleeping with married women. She stared at me for a long moment. You're lying. Prove it. I know it's you. Knowing and proving are two different things. Ask any lawyer. Why are you doing this? I'm not doing anything except protecting what's mine. My house, my marriage, my dignity. If Brett doesn't like the heat, he can get out of the kitchen. And if I don't like it, then you can get out too. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Julia's eyes widened, and I saw her realize that I wasn't the same man who'd been quietly accepting her lies for 3 months. Cal, choose Julia. Him or me. But choose soon, because I'm getting tired of waiting. Monday morning brought the call I'd been expecting. Julia's phone rang at 6 a.m., waking us both from an uneasy sleep. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with worry. Brett, what's wrong? I couldn't hear his words, but I could hear the panic in his tone. Julia sat up in bed, fully awake now. Slow down. What happened to your apartment? More frantic talking from Brett's end. How much water? Oh, God. No, don't go back inside if the ceiling collapsed. I got out of bed and started getting dressed like I was preparing for a normal day. But I was listening to every word. Where are you going to stay? No, you can't come here. Cal knows about us. That got my attention. I turned to look at her, and she quickly looked away. I don't know what to do either. Give me a few hours to think. She hung up and sat on the edge of the bed with her head in her hands. Problems? I asked. A water pipe burst in Brett's apartment last night. Flooded the whole place. The ceiling in his bedroom collapsed. That's unfortunate. Old buildings can have plumbing issues. Cal, please, don't pretend you don't know what's happening. I finished buttoning my shirt and turned to face her. What's happening is your boyfriend is having a run of bad luck. Flat tires, break-ins, prank calls, false police reports, and now a plumbing disaster. Either he's the unluckiest man in Massachusetts, or someone is trying to send him a message. You're destroying his life. I'm not destroying anything, but someone is definitely making his life complicated. Why won't you just admit it? Because admitting it would be stupid. And I'm not stupid, Julia. Naive, maybe. Trusting, definitely, but not stupid. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet suburban street. He wants me to leave with him. Leave and go where? He's thinking about moving to California. His company has an office in San Francisco. And you're considering it. I don't know what I'm considering anymore. I sat down on the bed and looked at my wife of 25 years. Even with her hair messy and her face puffy from sleep, she was still beautiful. Still the woman I'd fallen in love with. Julia, can I ask you something? She nodded without turning around. What did I do wrong? What? In our marriage. What did I do that made you want to find someone else? She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why? Because Brett made me feel young again. Exciting, like I was worth pursuing. And I didn't? She turned around, tears streaming down her face. Cal, we've been married for 25 years. We have routines. We watch the same TV shows, eat at the same restaurants, have the same conversations. Brett was different, new, dangerous. Dangerous enough to risk our marriage? I didn't think you'd find out. And if I hadn't? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I stood up and walked over to her. Julia, I need you to understand something. For 25 years, I've loved you. Not just the young, exciting version of you. The real you. The you who gets cranky when she's hungry and leaves coffee rings on the furniture and talks in her sleep. Cal, I've loved you through mortgage payments and job stress, and your mother's cancer, and Tyler's teenage rebellion, and all the ordinary, boring moments that make up a real life. That's not exciting or dangerous. It's just love. I know. Do you? Because Brett doesn't know any of that about you. He knows the version of you that shows up for dinner dates and hotel rooms. The version that doesn't have morning breath or worry about retirement savings. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. He's in love with a fantasy. I'm in love with you. She was crying harder now, and I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't. Not yet. So here's what's going to happen, I said. Brett's going to keep having bad luck until he decides Massachusetts isn't a good place for him anymore. And you're going to decide whether you want to go with the fantasy or stay with reality. And if I choose him, then you choose him. But you don't get to come back when you realize he doesn't actually want a real relationship with a real person. You don't get to come home when the excitement wears off and you're left with someone who doesn't really know you. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Julia, you've been lying to me for 3 months. You've been sneaking around, making me doubt my own sanity, telling our son I'm paranoid and delusional. And you want to talk about fair? I never told Tyler you told him something. Because my son thinks I belong in a nursing home, and he didn't get that idea from me. Julia admits she called me suspicious to explain my questions, and I tell her she made me the problem. She says she was scared of losing everything. I say she means losing me, and she doesn't argue. I add that I would have fought, counseling, separation, even divorce, if she'd been honest. But she wrote me off months ago and forgot to tell me. I leave her crying and make coffee under a clear October sky that feels like a reset. Then Tyler calls, shaken by her version. Harassment, paranoia, threats. I ask if in 32 years he's ever seen me violent or dishonest. He hasn't. I tell him the truth. Julia's affair with Brett Renard has been running for 3 months. Receipts, emails, texts, photos. He apologizes, realizes his late-night nursing home joke was twisted to paint me as confused. He wants to call her. I tell him not to. This is between his mother and me, and none of it changes that I'm proud of him and love him. After we hang up, I understand what truly ended the marriage. Not the affair, but the lies that tried to make me doubt my mind. At 10, Julia comes down for work. I tell her I spoke to Tyler and that she let him think I was failing rather than admit the cheating. She trembles, asks if he's coming home. No, he's staying out of it. I give her the line she can't straddle. Brett's bad luck will continue until he leaves town. She can go with him, or she can stay and try to save our marriage, but she can't have both. She wants time. She has until Brett leaves. By noon, Jace calls about a water main break flooding Brett's condo building. A coincidence, he says. I play dumb. That evening, Brett phones Julia in a panic about insurance and moving out. She asks if he can stay with us. Number. Not in my house, not at my table, not under my roof. If she wants to help, she can buy him a hotel room. If she leaves, she leaves. The next morning, her pillow's cold, and a note says she's helping him find a place. I call Jace. She's chosen, for now. I tell him to meet me at Romano's at 7 with his camera and his sense of humor. We'll make sure Brett understands that Massachusetts is no longer home. The end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching,